You have
Just
to put
say good afternoon back.
Okay,
All
I am
bros
the
and dead.
moderator for this session, not Suhel Seth. So, all of you have to listen to me, not to any of the other men on this panel.
Typical feminist thing.
On this happy note, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you all to my eclectic panel. Ashwin Sanghi with 13 Steps to Bloody Good Wealth on my immediate left. Recasting India by Hindol Sengupta, who's an editor at large at Forbes. Are you still at Fortune? Are you still with them?
I am.
Okay. The unmentionable Suhel Seth, right in the middle.
Have you ever
Binod-
written a book?
I've written lots of stories.
No, have they sold?
Lots of stories. Binod Chaudhury, one of Nepal's richest men, and on the Forbes list of billionaires. Welcome to India.
And remember, even after demonetization, he's still the richest man in Nepal.
And Sanjay Agarwal. I'm not sure you've written a book, but Sanjay is the owner of a bank called the Small Finance Bank. The AU Small Finance Bank. So all of you who cannot withdraw money from the ATMs, you know where you have to go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, our panel this afternoon is called The Color of Money, 50 Shades of Grey or any other color that you can think of across the spectrum. And I'd like to just start by saying that if you can just look at India and divide India into three phases. The first until 1991, called by many economists and some of these panelists, a sluggish, slumbering elephant who responded only to the Hindu rate of growth. After 91, the Manmohan Singh era begins, Narasimha Rao, Atal Bihari Vajpayee, where you have the animal spirits of the Indian economy are unleashed, and whatever animal you'd like to think of, whether it's the tiger, burning bright, or others. And then, stage 3, after November 8th, the Narendra Modi-led demonetization or Notebandi. I'm wondering what animal you'd like to ascribe that to. So first comments. What animal do you think the Notebandi or Narendra Modi's demonetization should be called? All of you, please think of your opening comments. Okay.
Arey bhai, mic chalao saab ka.
Binod, sorry, go ahead.
I think the demonetization is one of the only populist measure, and for me, I think that there would be more better way to do this cashless transaction or whatever way. And so very well, I think the thought through was very bad and the implementation was even worse.
Okay. Binod, your comments. The rupees legal tender in Nepal. What do you think of the demonetization?
Well, thankfully, in our country, money has only one color, There is nothing called black or white. We are bordering with India, as you all know, 1800 long, so we do trade in Indian currency. We've seen the hardship that the people are going through, how far this will continue is anybody's guess. I would say that it is, many of you may not like, it was needed at some point of time, but whether the government, RBI was best prepared and it was done in the right manner is a huge issue.
Suhel, what do you think?
About what?
You're not paying attention, young man.
No, because everyone has spoken on anything but your question. What's your question?
So my question is, what is your view on the Narendra Modi-led demonetization drive? And do you think that this constitutes stage 3 in India's economy, in the unleashing of the animal spirits? What is your view?
I don't know about animal spirits because I'm used to the other kind of spirits, but I have to say this, that I'm a deep, deep advocate of demonetization. I think Narendra Modi has done a splendid job. We needed to get black money out of the system. We needed people, some of whom are journalists other than you, who also had black money to be weeded out. And I'm glad people have gone through pain, because unless you go through pain, you don't realize how you've illegally gained. So I think Narendra Modi, his people have done a splendid job. A, B. Everyone says it could have been managed better. You could have married better. You could have had better children. You could have gone to a better school. There is no such thing as better. In India, you can't manage things when you have 1.2 billion people. I think they did what they had to do. Of course, it could have been better. It was not perfect. There's no such thing as perfection.
Okay.
And I don't want to ascribe any animal spirit. I think India, at its growth levels, is continuing to be the world's fastest growing economy, to hell with the IMF and the other Johnnies. And I think it's a great place to be in.
Thank you.
Well,
Hindol.
since you asked about animals, I think, and since Nicholas Nassim Taleb was at this festival, I think it's a classic black swan event. You know, everybody who's read the book and understands the concept, it's something that was unforeseen, and, you know, economies need these shocks to, you know, revitalize themselves or cleanse themselves. There has been pain. I mean, there is no doubt that there has been pain.
But the pain is
this
worth it.
This sort of shock, and there's one point that I want to make. In spite of all the columnists who's written, you know, all these articles about this, there hasn't been any real mass protest on the ground. Now, we have to consider why that is true, and collectively, all of us needs to consider. I just want to make one more point about a phrase that you used, and I've mentioned this in many of my lectures, but this is a great podium for me to put a dissenting note to that phrase. This phrase called Hindu rate of growth. It's the most utter bullshit that I've ever heard in my life. There was nothing Hindu about the rate of growth. If it is truly Hindu rate of growth, after 1991, the population of Hindus in this country remained the same. We showed that we can grow at the fastest pace ever. So there was nothing. There was one silly, you know, economist who came up with this weird phrase. I don't want to name names.
Name him, forget it.
No, no, anyway, whatever. So, I mean, it's ridiculous that we've accepted this phrase. It's a stupid phrase. We should not accept
Okay,
it.
there are young children in this audience, so I'd like you to moderate your language.
Sure,
please.
sure. But I mean, it is a stupid phrase anyway. You know.
Okay. So, Black Swan event, you think the pain was worth it? Yeah. Ashwin.
Since you mentioned animal, let me again just take off from there. I think it was probably a monkey. The reason I'm mentioning that is because if we look at Hanuman, ultimately when he wanted to set Lanka on fire, he first had to burn his tail. So, I mean, that's the way at least I see it, that there's been a lot of pain in order for some gain.
So if Hanuman needs to burn his tail to achieve the goods in Lanka, would you say that this phase that we're going through, even though you believe that there is very little protest on the ground, and Suhel has just rubbished IMF projections of the economy doing sort of losing 1% of GDP, would you say that, so how long is this going to take, do you think? And, you know, we're not going to go into the elections that are around the corner and whether the people of India, or at least middle India, are going to vote against or in favor of Mr. Modi's drive. But are you saying that this is worth it in the end?
I think it's an excellent question. I didn't rubbish IMF. I said IMF is known to get their data wrong, as even India Today, your former organization, has reported on many an occasion. There are three things that we must be cognizant of here. There will be short-term acute pain, especially amongst the working classes who were thriving or perhaps existing on a cash-driven economy. I don't only refer to the workers in a Bhiwadi, or I don't refer to workers only in a Kanpur, but even if you look at the tea gardens, there is short-term pain. Number two, when an economy recalibrates itself in the manner in which currency is transacted, there is an economic cost that you pay in the short term, but the gains in the long term are manifold.
So how long is long term? I
would say, since I deal with brands and marketing and chairman and CEOs, I would say at least 2 quarters, including October, November, December. But November, December, the fallout will be in Jan, Feb, March. I would say until around September. Having said that, Jyoti, and I don't want to get into this argument about, did all the money come back, blah, blah, blah. What has happened is 3.5 lakh crores, which was not part of the accountable economy, is today part of the accountable economy. To my mind, that's a great step forward. I'm not interested in whether black, white. And finally, I will say, as a tax-paying citizen, I'm delighted that people are being raided. I want people to be arrested, and I want people to be locked up. Because these people were evading taxes. These people were running a parallel economy. They were funding terror in some parts, funding whatever in other parts. I think it was worth it, and I'm delighted we've had the courage as a 1.28 billion people to take this pain for the sake of the larger national cause.
So this approval of class warfare that Suhel has just given us, would you say, Ashwin, that you're talking about making money, the 13 steps that you talk about in your book, and I'm just trying to connect all your books now to the debates that we're all part of. Would you say that in the next 8 or 9 months or the 2 or 3 quarters that you can still make good money in India?
Oh, absolutely. I would agree 100% with what Suhel just said. The fact of the matter is that the moment one is talking about wealth creation, and frankly, there are many better people to answer this at this panel, particularly the ones who actually made wealth or created wealth. But from my perspective, based on what I have understood, I think it was the Nobel Prize-winning economist Samuelson who said that creating wealth is like watching paint dry or watching grass grow. In other words, it's a very, very long-term process. And so to that extent, this, in the final scheme of things, will count as a blip. It will count as a blip. Having said that, obviously the immediate effect is on several people. And it's probably a little easier for us to sit here on stage and say, well, it's a perfect step. There are lots of issues. But I think net, you can't ever have a decision in this country which is always going to have, there's nothing like a perfect balance sheet.
Okay.
There will always be pros and cons.
Hindol, yeah, I'm actually coming to you, Hindol, and in your book you write about over the last 25 or 26 years now since the economic reform was unleashed in the early 90s, that there is a middle India of entrepreneurs that has emerged, right? Yes. But you've also said that this economic reform process has created islands of California in the middle of sub-Saharan Africa. So now there's iniquitous wealth that we see in our country.
Yeah, so that's of course an Amartya Sen phrase. Amartya Sen and Jean Drèze wrote about this. My larger point in the book and in this debate is 2 things. Number one, just to connect to what both of them were saying, we cannot forget that 2 of the main problem areas of India, and I was astonished, even as a veteran journalist, to see that the intifada, which we were being told is being unleashed in Kashmir, suddenly vanished. It was the miraculous vanishing of the intifada.
No, I don't agree with that. You cannot link the intifada with the demonetization.
One second.
Different things have happened.
No, one second. There is no doubt, now whether you want to call it intifada, whatever you want to call it, there is no doubt that the protests in Kashmir, quote unquote the protests in Kashmir, really bettered down once this demonetization happened. That has been extensively written about.
That's one view.
That's one. Number 2, again, widely reported, the lack of, quote unquote, or the stopping of Naxal activity in central India, without question, came down extensively, again, widely reported. What has happened in the last 25 years is this. We were always an entrepreneurial nation. I mentioned this in my book. You look at the wide span of Indian history, 5,000 years, we were always an entrepreneurial nation. This socialist bit is going to be a blip in our history. We are going back to being an
socialist bit? The
post-independence socialist blip is going to be a blip in our history. If you look at the large span of Indian history, we were an entrepreneurial nation. We are going back to being an entrepreneurial nation. Chandrabhan Prasad, the great Dalit economist who I mentioned in my book, has done extensive research with Devesh Kapoor, again I mentioned in my book, about the impact of economic liberalization on Dalit communities in Uttar Pradesh. How the entire caste system, one of the biggest, and Chandrabhan Prasad argues, which I mentioned, that one of the best ways to fight caste discrimination is by using the power of the markets, right? So I think that momentum is completely sweeping this country. And if, as we hear, and I'm sure you have heard too, that the next thing that the government is probably going to do is the entire Benami property thing. Extremely welcome if it happens. Extremely welcome if it happens. The entire NCR economy is a black economy largely fueled by illegal real estate. If we can get a Benami real estate, property, the public policy going, it would be extremely welcome.
So this is Delhi coming to Jaipur. He's Hindol. Some of you may know and some of you may not. The NCR refers to the National Capital Region around Delhi, but it doesn't extend to Jaipur. Certainly doesn't extend to Chennai or Thiruvananthapuram. But Binod, to come back to you, now Nepal and India, like you said in your opening comments, have an open border, an 1,800 kilometer long open border, where the rupee is legal tender. It's perhaps the only nation in South Asia where the rupee is legal tender. You are dealing with this crisis. But my question to you is slightly different. So apart from the fact that you're a self-made billionaire, I also want to ask you, as a citizen of Nepal, would you say that what happens in India, you know, we are a very inward-looking people, and even this debate sort of shows that we are so focused on what's happening within India. But how does it play out in a neighboring country like Nepal?
Well, before I come back to this question, just two short comments on the previous two questions you asked. I'm tempted to answer. You know, I'm a great supporter of demonetization, I've said in the beginning. However, let's not forget that overnight, 83% of the currencies vanished from the market. We're still paying a price. The market, suddenly, people had no money. Okay?
In Nepal?
No, I mean, in all, by and large, the 1,800 kilometers is what forms more than 70% of the border. Okay, I mean, 70% of the country's population. That's the most populous lowland, the Tarai of Nepal. But more importantly, you know, to bring the attempt, the core ethos of demonetization is to wipe out the so-called black money and bring the system into the formal part of the economy. If I'm not mistaken, even in India, less than 50% of the people have access to banks, okay, or even post office. So this is a journey which is going to be extremely painful, but in the end, India will win. There'll be far larger investments.
But will Nepal win?
Interest rates will come down.
Will Nepal win? When India wins, does Nepal win?
When it snows, Jyoti, when it snows in India, we get the cold fever. So don't worry. I mean, we are, you know, there are, leave aside the political boundaries. The South Asia is so closely integrated with India, particularly when you talk of the bordering nations like Nepal, you know. We have our 80% of the trade and investments are with India, okay? So I think anything that happens in India which is positive is going to have a positive fallout on Nepal. We are anxiously looking forward to Indian interest rates coming down, okay? Taxes coming down. We have a fair amount of presence in India now, at least for our well-known YY brand. You know, we produce all over India. We like that to grow. So we will win in the end. India will win.
Yeah, I'm glad you say that.
But the pain it's going to be extremely painful for quite much longer than what my friend Suhel mentioned here.
So much longer than 2 or 3 quarters. But I'd like all of you to now respond to this connection that Binod talks about between India and the rest of South Asia. Binod, you have a lot of business in the Maldives, in Sri Lanka, of course. The Taj Group in Colombo, in Mali. You have a couple of islands, hotel resorts in the Maldives. Ashwin, Suhel, I just want you to answer this connected question about India and the neighborhood in terms of wealth creation. Do you think that we should have free borders for the movement of goods and peoples? For example, the movement of goods. What do you think, Ashwin?
Well, frankly, I think this is a time when there is almost a certain sense, I sense a certain amount of fear which has been created by demonetization. And I would simply say that probably we need to take a leaf out of Warren Buffett's book, who said that it's time to be greedy when others are fearful, and it's time to be fearful when others are greedy. So probably when you see a lot of fear around you, that's probably the moment when there are opportunities waiting. whether it's within India or whether it's the bordering countries of India, whether it's in terms of that entire global engine. So I would simply say that, listen, at the end of the day, this is an opportunity more than a threat.
Okay. What about you, Sanjay? Do you want to expand your business, expand your banks or whatever else that you do in the money-making business to other
No,
to
actually,
the neighborhood?
yeah. So we are governed by RBI. So as a moment, we are not allowed to go out of India. But I would just want to answer the previous two questions where we're talking about the benefits of demonetization for a longer term. But my own perception is this: when money comes back, maybe 80%, 90% time, which may be in February or March, then what happened? People will take the money out from the system, and again the cash economy will be there, right? So how we are stopping that? So my own point of view is this: the government has to put the infra first. They have to put, because it's easy to say in Jaipur or Bombay or Delhi all about the debit card and ATM card, but I work in the rural belts, where even the POS machines are not there, connectivity is not there.
So where do you work? So tell us a little bit about your experience with working in rural India.
Yeah, so rural areas, what happened, because those customers have the cash only, right? They deal in cash. It's not a black money, honestly. Because they have been developed like this, that they have to pay in cash, they have to take in cash, and banking is so pathetic, pathetic, because it's open at 11, closed down at 2 o'clock, right? How can you dependable on that system? And infra is not there.
So no infrastructure.
Infra means there is no POS machine, there is no connectivity, there is no education. Half of the people are illiterate, They even understand what is 500, what is 1,000 rupees, right? So we need to go back, and see that whether the government would have done more in infra first, put on the, what SEBI has done over the years, in 20 years, to convert the share market, one of the best market in India. I think the cash economy will only go away when we have a good infra, good system of connectivity, good system of people who can take this authority.
So
now what is happening now?
Your note of caution is a good one in this debate.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Suhel, just to come back to the question of connectivity across borders, do you think that India and the other countries in South Asia, should we have open borders where you can have free movement of trade, of labor, which is people's, and people making money across the region?
See, trade as a fundamental concept is based on mutuality of benefit. That's the fundamental concept of trade. So if we have an open border with Sri Lanka, are we going to open our trade positions even on areas like tea, which we need to kind of protect? Many years ago, Darjeeling was registered by a Sri Lankan brand, Darjeeling tea. So there are trademark issues. But I want to touch a larger question, and taking off from what Mr. Agarwal said. It is incorrect to believe that demonetization, and if the government has communicated that, they have not done the right thing. There is no economy in the world which is bereft of cash. But there are economies in the world which are bereft of illegally gained wealth, which you don't declare and evade taxes on.
But what's the problem with me or my mother or my mother-in-law keeping a few thousand rupees
no
stashed under my mattress?
Not at all. You can stash it where you want, as long as it's legal.
As long as it's legal, absolutely.
My argument, Jyoti, very simply is, yes, in urban towns in India, there is not that much of a problem with connectivity. You go 30, 40, 60 kilometers out of urban centers, there is a problem. But the government is willing to address that. The problem with us is, we have become almost like Mamta Banerjee. We have a problem for every solution in India. So we've got to give ourselves some time. It's not going to happen overnight. Having said that, the issue that you raised, twofold, about trade borders collapsing, they will collapse on the strength of market factors determining their collapse. Like we saw in EU, but even EU has huge restrictions within. I mean, that's why you had Mandelson perform the role he did as the EU Trade Commissioner. The second is, I'm a great believer, not in just my country from a patriotic or a jingoistic or a nationalistic sense. I'm a great believer that the young in this country have begun to re-engage with the politics of our country, and they believe that we are ready for transparency and ethics If that continues, we are doing well.
So,
I just want to make one small
Yeah.
point about this across borders, because I happen to be one of the few people who's not only spoken to Binod Chaudhury, the richest man in Nepal and the biggest businessman in Nepal, but also Mia Mohammad Mansha, who I spent a lot of time with, the biggest businessman in Pakistan. By far, their biggest, wealthiest person and their biggest businessman. And if there's one thing common between Mia Mohammad Mansha and Binod Chaudhury, it's their consistent efforts within their country to engage with their own country's political systems to push for this idea of a South Asian free trade zone. This is consistently happening. However, and you will understand this obviously only too well, there are very significant security concerns that India has.
So the question here is that should security concerns, which are legitimate, several of which are legitimate, but because India is this huge nation in the middle of, huge country in the middle of this nation, and therefore all of us talk about greater responsibilities, would you as a Nepali, Binod, I'd like to just come back to this question and perhaps then we can move to some other one, is that do you think as a Nepali, India has greater responsibilities in promoting free trade, or not free trade, but the movement of trade and peoples across the region?
Absolutely. I must say, and thank you, Hindol, I've been personally working when I was the president of the FNCCI, the CII, etc., to create a vibrant South Asian economic zone, so to speak. And it hurts, it pains to see that we are probably the world's poorest economic community bloc.
So why hasn't it happened?
It is purely, it's a long story. Pakistan is certainly one angle, and the whole premise of this SAARC, South Asian Association, is consensus decision making. So it has not moved an inch, while there have been economies who have integrated. ASEAN, look at ASEAN, where ASEAN has reached. India, as an economic powerhouse and world's third largest economy in the making by 2025, certainly has the responsibility to pull up the South Asian neighbors. Not only by opening the borders.
Would you say including Pakistan?
Well, Pakistan is a different story. I wouldn't like to get into that. If it's difficult, and it is difficult to find a solution, leave Pakistan out. But why should I as a Nepalese suffer, okay, because of apprehensions or relationship issues between Pakistan and India, to deal with Sri Lanka or with Bangladesh? There is a chicken neck next door to my country, okay, in the North Bengal, which goes to Bangladesh. We've never been able to have free access to Bangladesh. We cannot export our goods to Lahore. I have to go through Dubai, whereas it'll be very easy for me to go through Wagah border. Mm-hmm. So I think you have to appreciate that, to have disgruntled neighbors all around. I think one thing India has failed in doing, and this is my humble submission, doesn't point out to any particular government, the present, or I'm talking about over the years, is not managing the South Asian relationship. You all South Asian neighbors are disgruntled, unhappy. There is political chaos in all these countries. And most of these countries, whenever a government falls or whenever a government gets formed, India's name comes in front. And you know that.
Okay. So just to come back to the
It's
books,
like our buildings. No one is fond of their neighbor.
It's like, say that again, it's like what?
It's in apartment blocks. You're not fond of your neighbor, are you?
That depends.
There you are.
So
Yeah.
we got to change that. We got to change that. And we are very hopeful that with the transparency that is going to come as a consequence of the demonetization, probably many of these apprehensions will vanish slowly. Mm-hmm. Security concerns are legitimate, but no way by literally, keeping the economy's development of the neighbors hostage, you'll be able to address that. I think you'll be able to address that better by having a happy neighbor who also believes in protecting the Indian interest.
Okay. So just to return to the books that you guys have written, and Ashwin, you write in your books, and one of the 13 steps that you talk about is, and I like this phrase, it says, what's your hustle? So So what's your hustle, Ashwin?
Well, I mean, of course, there is the old proverb which says that those who can do and those who can't teach. So I've been teaching through this book because probably I wasn't very successful at implementing it myself. But I think the point is that I find that the vast majority of people who have actually created wealth are not necessarily people who went after wealth. Their wealth came as a byproduct, almost.
So give this audience three tips.
So,
You know, some of them who haven't read your book.
let me give it to you from through my own story. That I started out my life as a businessman, but my grandfather is the one who introduced me to books, and that's probably the reason I became a writer. And of course, he, in my father's place of work, there was this Munimji who used to always see me with a book in my hand, and he would say that bookkeeping is much more important than book reading. And he said, if you must waste your time, then waste your time reading a balance sheet. Why are you reading a book? And on the other hand, my grandfather would tell me that, no, that's not the way it is, because passion and money are related to one another. So he said, to my mind, you need to have both Lakshmi and Saraswati in your life. And when you have both Lakshmi and Saraswati in your life, then these two deities, these two goddesses, they tend to actually not be too fond of each other. The moment you have Lakshmi coming into the equation, Saraswati tends to run away. And which is so true, no?
I like the fact that you have both goddesses on both your sides.
No, but the point is, the bigger point is, that what he said is that if you see when both these goddesses are sitting together, the only thing that can keep them together is Ganeshji.
Okay.
Right? Because he's always shown pictured in the middle. And so I like to joke that probably that explains my physique in some ways.
I was just going to ask,
but
does your size have anything to do with it? So Suhel, what about you?
But I think you need to go after. I think you need to go after Saraswati. Lakshmi automatically follows.
Great. So Suhel, since size matters, according to Ashwin, what's your hustle?
I'm used to people asking me questions in English, but I'll imagine you're asking me what works for me, so I'll attempt an answer.
Thank you.
We were born and raised in Calcutta. Money was a means, never the end, and it never should be. I think the distinction between wealth and money is wealth is harnessed both for greater good and for personal glory or personal satisfaction. And the creation of wealth, to my mind, is also legacy. It's also what you leave behind. To my mind, knowledge is wealth. This literature festival is wealth. Money would only be currency. To my mind, what is wealth is the anecdotes that your grandparents would tell you. The love that you share between yourself and your parents. Wealth is indescribable only in a balance sheet term. When you start defining wealth across the same parameters as money, you cause the greatest confusion and the biggest mistake. For me, I think, and there was a brilliant session yesterday with Bibek Debroy and Mr. Haksar on Kalidasa. I think where this country, and thanks to the Jaipur Literature Festival and people like them, we are bringing back and we are harnessing the wealth of knowledge, the wealth of giving back, the wealth of sharing, the bookmark, the 400 kids who are at Jaipur railway station coming to this festival. To my mind, the Jaipur Literature Festival is a harbinger of that wealth that India must celebrate. And I've always said, the day the Fortune magazines of the world and the Forbes banish the rich list and create the give list, I would doff my hat. We need to celebrate people who give back to society.
So thank you. That was beautifully spoken. And that sort of brings me to a question about giving, about philanthropy and charity. What is the difference between the two? Ashwin, may I come back to you? Oh, Hindol, would you like to say something on that?
I think there's a fundamental thing that we do not understand, and we always had in our tradition, which we have forgotten. Correct. That anything that we acquire, we have forgotten the interrelatedness of things. That when you extract, and if you want to call it wealth, so be it, when you extract something from the ecosystem, Something else must go into the ecosystem. Basic understanding of even quantum physics teaches you that everything is interconnected. And if you look at Indian philosophy, Indian thought, Indian culture, this thought was predominant there. What has happened is these days we see philanthropy also as a hustle, to take the word that was coming up. कि जी मैंने philanthropy कर दिया, वहाँ पे भी somebody, you call 3 reporters, 2 TV channels, and you talk about the philanthropy you do. That then is the problem. That is not the giving that works. The giving that really works is the kind of giving, you know, I've just written a book on Swami Vivekananda. Let me give you an example of giving that is very dear to me during the research of that book. The Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore was created after a journey in a ship where Jamshedji Tata and Swami Vivekananda met each other and for several days had a conversation on what knowledge in science really means. After which, Jamshedji Tata, according to himself, Swami Vivekananda told him, if you're going to do anything, please create an institute of international caliber that will help us regain that sense of science and knowledge that we always had. When Jamshedji Tata created that, Swami Vivekananda was invited to be the first person to head that. Of course, he refused, but that's a great example of how philanthropy should be done, not as PR.
Thanks. Yeah,
You know, I just very quickly, I'm sorry to intervene. I started my career as an advertising person with the Tatas, with Tata Steel. You've got to understand the philosophy of Tata Trusts from time immemorial. It's about giving back in 4 areas: education, water, sanitation, and urban city smartness, but not in the smartness we understand. Why did Jamshedji Tata want to give back? Because he believed, as Hindol said, he had taken from. The problem in India is we take, but we want to give back only to our children. The concept of sharing the legacy with the community has vanished. And I can tell you, and I say it with deep deference, people are willing to spend thousands of rupees on wine and food and whatever. But the poor of this country, as a percentage, give more of their wealth back than the rich of this country. So when that changes, we'll be in a happy place. The worst thing is we try and emulate, and you know, he referred to it. It is sad that we invited the Warren Buffetts of the world to India. Manu in Manu Smriti, 3,800 years ago, or whatever it was, talks about Daan. The problem is we forget our own history in order to contemporize our knowledge and think, oh, we want to be like America. America will never be like India because we give because we want to give, not because we get tax credits.
So whether it's daan or dakshina, and anyway, dakshina is a different word and has different meanings. So Sanjay, this thing about the poor giving a greater fraction of what they earn or what they of their wealth. So, now, I just want to compare this with, you know, Hindol has a line in his book about Mukesh Ambani's 26th floor house in Mumbai called Antilla, I think. Now, how would you compare this? So, do you agree that, with Suhel, that the poor give? You know, you work in rural areas.
Yeah,
and why do they give? And you know, and to Suhel's question is that Indians don't give as much as perhaps we used to.
Correct. So I think I'm 100% with Suhel on this because poor actually does not start knowing about his wealth. No? For him, it's very natural to help, to give his money, or you know, to share his wealth among his own people because of his upbringing, right?
No, but why? Is it that because they're still dependent on each other?
No, I think it's more of their own condition or the living the way they live, the way they brought themselves up. You know, like for example, in our every case, you know, in every loan case, we need to have a guarantor, right? So we always want to bank upon the existing customer who can give the guarantee. So he will give the guarantee without any, you know, getting money back. He just give because he knows the fellow, or he's from his same village, or he want that guy to be more successful. So I think I'm completely agree with Suhel on that side. But you know, on the Anil Ambani side or Mukesh Ambani side, my view is that if the money is legal, if the money is white, you know, you build not only 20, 30, 40, you build 100-story building. but it has to be legalized. You know, the challenge with Mukesh Ambani, all those people, because we as an Indian don't think as a system that the money has been earned legally, right?
Okay. So you feel that as long as the money is white, it's okay to do whatever you want with it?
No, I think I have the greatest admiration for Nehru's liberal thinking, but he almost made money seem dirty, profit a dirty word. This socialist hangover is something we must get out of.
Yes.
If people have made money legally, celebrate rather than envy.
Yes.
Get them to inspire rather than get them to withdraw.
So why don't we still give? That's the question, Ashwin, and then to you, Binod. Why is it that Indians, you talk about Manu and you talk about our tradition of giving, of poor people giving.
Well, I think,
why don't the rich give?
Well, I think they do give, but probably in percentage terms, as a percentage of their wealth, they obviously don't do enough.
Why not?
But the reason for that, to some extent, I don't know, I was watching this very interesting sitcom on HBO called Silicon Valley. And in that, there is this billionaire, and he is lying face down on the couch, and he's wailing, he's sobbing like a baby. And what is the apparent reason? Because as a result of stock market fluctuations, he no longer is worth $1 billion, but is worth about $968 million. And of course, someone asks him, what's the big deal? And he says, well, I'm no longer part of the 3 comma club, because that's the 3 commas in a billion. So the point is, sometimes I think it just becomes almost the process of earning money and accumulating it almost becomes the end in itself. Chanakya in his Arthashastra told us that, listen, wealth is something that the way, for example, you're sitting for a puja, you also not only offer to the gods, but then you also get prasad from the gods. So it's almost that. It's as sacred as that. But somewhere along the way, we seem to have lost that.
Okay, but you still haven't answered the question why we've lost.
So
I
think
I partially did, because to my mind, it's all about the fact that we are almost using money to keep score rather than using it as a way to achieve something beyond it.
Okay.
Can I just give a one-line answer? Sure. Since he's talking about Arthashastra, I want to make 2 very small points. Yesterday, 2 highly educated, members of, or Indians of Delhi society told me, and it's not their fault, don't misunderstand me, that they didn't even know that something called the Arthashastra even existed.
No, listen, that's not the point.
No, one second. Let me make the point. You keep asking why we have forgotten to give, because we're a deracinated race. We've been cut away from everything that we held dear. That's one point.
Hindol, hold on a second.
One second.
Hold on a second. You cannot generalize on behalf of the 2 people that you meet.
No, I'm not
Some Indians may be deracinated. No, Hindol, 1 second. Sorry.
There is a deracination problem in this country.
No, that's fine.
They are from Delhi. They can be forgiven.
Yes,
Let's move on.
Okay.
Jyoti, I think, Jyoti, in my view, we are insecure.
We are insecure.
Yes, because, people generally, because we are just 70-year-old country, right? People haven't seen that kind of wealth. They have seen the wealth in the last 20 years, right? So I think people are getting now mature. If you see 20 years before, even this kind of philanthropy was not there, right? In my opinion, next 30, 40 years, you will see very different India.
That's a good point, Binod.
Yes.
Last words to you, and then we'll open the house.
First of all, I'll urge that let's get our facts right, okay? And let's not generalize.
Yeah.
Forbes, to my friend here, Forbes and Fortune, they run some of the world's biggest philanthropy forums,
Outfits.
which recognizes people who are deeply involved and engaged in that. Okay, number 1. Number 2, people who made their money through the hard ways, they are no fools not to realize, okay, that today people care for those who engage with the society. Nobody cares how much of money you own, how much of money you've made. Why has Bill Gates given up everything and driving this Giving Pledge mission all over the world? I mean, without any disrespect to any other business house, why does Tata's name comes at the forefront when it comes to philanthropy in India?
Okay, so
I think,
just a quick
so what
question,
I'm saying, people are conscious, okay? They may not, everybody may not like to advertise or talk about it. And I think in our part of the world, the culture of giving is much more than in the West, if you ask me.
Okay. So we don't like to talk about the fact that we give and to who we give. I'm going to open up this debate. So if anybody'd like to ask a question, yeah, go ahead. No, the gentleman there. Jyoti. Another 10 minutes.
My question is in a way related to the comment by Ganesh ji regarding
Ganesh ji,
Yeah.
Ashwin Sanghi.
there are three types of people in India.
You just ask your question, Ji.
Yeah, Lakshmi Putra, Saraswati Putra, and Dharti Putra. Two have been taken care of by Narendra Modi ji's steps, and now it's the turn of Dharti Putras, those with the land part of it. My query is that generally, the general tenor is, or in the debate or in other sessions also, that this person is doing wrong, and it gathers a lot of
Can
claps.
you just ask your question,
I'm
please?
coming
Yeah.
to the question part only.
Thank you.
The general tenor is that we just ridicule the system is wrong, these people are taken off care of. We are not futuristic looking. We are not saying where we are going. We should be planning more for the future. Where does the economy go from here? Maybe we have taken care of the black
is that
money.
your question? Where
Yeah,
does
that's
the
it.
economy go from
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
Ashwin?
What's the question, sir?
Where does the economy go from here?
Where do we go?
Yeah, where does the
At
economy...
1:15 for lunch.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
Okay, hi. My question is directed at Hindol. Good going. So, you made a lot of unsubstantiated claims today, including the things going down in Kashmir or maybe. So, my question is like, no, actually, I would tell you in Nagaland the things got worsened if you look at the facts, but that's not my question. My question is regarding the most outrageous comment you made. That was that India was always an entrepreneurial nation.
Yes.
And that is the way for Dalit upliftment.
Yes.
So my question is like, if you look at...
Chandrabhan Prasad says this, the
Whatever.
Dalit economist.
No,
Okay.
let him ask the question. Let him ask the question.
So I'll complete my question. So in the last 2,000 years or maybe 3,000 years of Indian history, I'm asking you to give maybe one or probably two instances of a successful Dalit enterprise. Please.
No, one second. Hold on. I don't know whether you heard what I said. I said in my book, there is an entire chapter which quotes some of the most prominent Dalit economists alive in India today, doing extensive research for the last 10, 15 years. Research that has been published not only in EPW, but in University of Pennsylvania and around the world, which shows that in the last 25 years, because of economic liberalization, caste has the worst excesses of caste in places, many places and pockets of states like Uttar Pradesh has really come down. I urge you to look at that research. I have named places where you can find that research. Please look at it, then come back and ask me a question.
Okay, so that's a good question to the young boy. That's a good question about Dalit entrepreneurs. And in one of the books that these gentlemen have written, there is this description of Kalpana Morparia, right? I don't know which
Kalpana
one.
Morparia.
Yeah. Now, she is a Dalit, and she is a very well-known wealth creator.
No, Kalpana Saroj.
Kalpana Saroj, I'm sorry.
Kalpana Saroj.
She's a very well-known wealth creator, so her example is actually quite uplifting.
And many others. I mean,
Yeah.
several others.
Yes, the lady here. I think she wanted to ask a question. Ji.
A lot of you have spoken about our culture having been one of giving. Would you then say that with the advent of capitalism and the celebration of the market economy, one of you mentioned we like to see the numbers totting up, that could be the cause of reduced giving?
No.
Do you want to answer that?
No, but what is the question?
The question
The
is
question is
Keeping score.
keeping score and the advent of the market economy leading to less of sharing because you're basically wanting to tot up your accounts and see them grow, like the example of those -3 commas and depression, etc.
So what's the question?
So the question is, do you give less now that you started?
Because
now
you're
you're
keeping
allowed
score.
to make more money.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think there's a universality about that rule. It is incorrect to assume because you need capital to run your businesses, you will ignore what I would call the social or the moral compass within your ecosystem. Binod referred to it. I've actually written about this for policy papers, especially when we were doing the CSR thing, and I was personally against the 2% tax which the government mandates, because it made a lot of companies accountable to their shareholders and forced to bring down their spends when they could easily afford to spend more. I don't think it's apples for apples. There are companies which continue to diversify their portfolio. And I'll say one last thing, and this is why I think the imprint of the Tatas is the most definitive. When you build schools and hospitals around a steel plant, you have to, because your workers need them, your vendors need them, blah, blah, blah. It is when you go beyond business and do stuff that has nothing to do with your immediate ecosystem is when true philanthropy takes place. So I'm much happier with the Tata Medical Center, which is a cancer facility in Calcutta catering to the entire East, including the Northeast, rather than just the hospital, the Tata main hospital in Jamshedpur. I think that distinction we need to bear in.
Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
I think there is fundamentally in our country, we excel in dualities. There is this wonderful Urdu sher, and obviously every sher has to have two sentences. The first goes, ki paisa khuda nahi hai. And the second sentence that immediately follows, par khuda ki kasam khuda se kam bhi nahi hai. So the point is that duality will always exist. And that's the very nature of India. So you will see a lot of giving happening, but you will also see a lot of hoarding happening, which is probably the case in every society.
Okay, the young man here in this track.
Jyoti, may I chip in?
Sure.
You know, I think there is, we are all giving too much of emphasis to money. You know, you can find, and particularly now, you can find huge people, a huge amount of entrepreneurs with no money made it really big within the shortest possible time. Today is the age of ideas. It's about ideas, it's about, I mean, you know, the whole business of disruption that we all keep talking about, startups that we talk about. I mean, you know, I see a lot of young faces here. I mean, the times are changing. The largest hotel company in this world doesn't own one hotel room. The largest taxi company in the world doesn't own one taxi. Okay? It's about connecting people.
Okay,
Somewhere someone was standing and he didn't find a cab, and he said, look, my God, I mean, you know, I mean, there may be somebody next door and who's passing this way,
Okay,
and if there was a way to communicate.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Since we're talking about young people, there's a man in a green sweater at the back. Yeah, go ahead. Sure, just ask your question. No, they can't. Okay, just wait for the mic.
Good morning, sir. So don't you think the inefficiency of the government often compels people to evade tax? And that is the primary reason for tax evasion?
You know,
Mr.
I have
Seth,
to say this.
That's your question.
This is the most commonly heard excuse in our country. Avoid taxes because where is our money used? If everyone starts behaving like you, we'll have nothing to spend on. So I think it is a very facetious and dangerous argument. It is actually the fundamentals of a weird kind of civil unrest. We need to improve efficiencies. We need to compel governments to become accountable. We don't need to become illegal or convicts or corrupt and then justify it by saying, oh, the government is inefficient, that's why I want to evade taxes. I think it's a very, very dangerous argument.
Okay, last two questions. The gentleman in the striped muffler.
And the bald gentleman.
Okay, you can ask.
I mean, not bald, but you know what I
let
mean.
this guy, you get the last one. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, shirt to bahut badhiya hai.
Ji.
Hi. This is a land of dharma, so I agree with Mr. Chaudhury when he said that there is a lot of giving without people telling. There is a temple not too far from here where there's a free food for everybody.
Okay, could you just ask your question, please? Thank you.
The gentleman, other gentleman there said.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to let you. No, you have to ask your question.
The question is.
Yes.
should the civil governance be allowing the tax breaks that you mentioned, fostering that so that the more giving happens? Because there are
Okay.
lots and lots of people who are giving, but more people will be encouraged to give if the civil governance allows that structure.
Okay,
already
Governor,
does.
one
No,
second.
but there is only.
One second. You can ask just give the mic to this young man. You can ask your question too.
Good noon. My question is to Mr. Binod Chaudhury.
Yeah.
I just want to ask about when we are talking about the good policy and all that stuff. Now the CPAC is there, and we have the SARC since 1986-87. Now SAFTA is never been a reality. Now CPAC and China, do you see that SAFTA will be ever a reality in future?
Okay. The
SAFTA
comparison-
is too little, too late. It has lost its relevance. Okay?
No, and the
For that
comparison with
matter, even-
China. The comparison with China is the
Well,
question.
India had chosen to deal with each of the neighboring countries without promoting a community, the whole SARC structure. That's fine. Likewise, China has taken that as an opportunity. Okay? China is far more aggressive today in most of the South Asian economies. It sometimes worries. Okay? So I think there is a lot of thinking, deep thinking that needs to go on.
Okay, last question. Go ahead.
I think that the gentleman's question never got answered.
सुहेल सर, आप जब 7-8 साल पहले फर्स्ट टाइम यहाँ आए थे तब से मैं JLF अटेंड कर रहा हूँ और यहाँ वेल मैनेज्ड चलता है, पर इस बार जो स्टार्टिंग में हमने देखा था, जिस दिन आप भी थे और मुख्यमंत्री साहिबा भी आई थी, तो ये जो प्रोग्राम था वो थोड़ा सा लेट स्टार्ट हो पाया था। तो मेरा इसी से नोटबंदी से जुड़ा हुआ ये सवाल है कि कई लंबे समय से जो इंडिया में चल रही थी प्रॉब्लम, उसको सॉल्व करने के लिए यदि कुछ प्रॉब्लम आ भी जाती है तो क्या उसको समय नहीं दिया जाना चाहिए गवर्नमेंट को या रिजर्व बैंक को?
इसीलिए तो उन्होंने लेट शुरू किया था, समय दिया था प्लानिंग के लिए। आप इतना चिंतित क्यों हो रहे हैं? आप भी 8 साल से आ रहे हैं।
Okay,
ये तो नहीं है वो वीकडे था, आप ऑफिस नहीं गए, आप भी बैठे हुए थे। रिलैक्स करिए, खुश रहिए। इस देश में खुश रहना ही इसेंशियल है।
Just the last question on civil governance. Do you want to take that, Hindol?
Yeah,
But
just
a
one
quick answer,
example,
quick
which is
answer.
he has a point in one aspect which most of us understand, which is philanthropy in art. Our regulations are so bad that not enough private money is going into funding art in India because of government regulations. So there's a point there.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you all to all my participants.
Thank you,
Ashwin,
Jyoti.
Hindol,
Excellently
Suhel,
moderated,
Binod,
truly.
and Sanjay. Thank you so much.